Welcome to the P Security channel once again. Now, if you recall, I did test Emsisoft's new version 9 beta a few days ago, and I had some issues with it, so I decided to send those issues straight to Mairoll, the CEO of Emsisoft, and he has given me a pretty detailed response explaining some of the issues like the memory usage. So I just thought some of you might want to hear his views and his answers to my questions, so I'm going to share them with you. So here's his basic response. My first question was about memory usage. As you know, if you've already seen the beta, Emsisoft tends to use a lot of memory, and I'm using Emsisoft on my host machine right now, so I've got a bit of experience of using this thing. Now, where do they have their guard? There you go. At the moment, 175 megabytes. So that was my first concern with the new Emsisoft. He says that memory consumption depends on your chosen settings. If you enable memory optimization settings in the main, the used memory will be low after running the software for quite a while, only a few megabytes, sometimes even less. But performance will be a bit worse on older hardware. If you disable the option, 500 megabytes are to be expected, so that's a lot of memory right there. But best performance is ensured. Well, we must store those 12 million signatures somewhere. I guess that's a valid point. RAM is to be used to get the most out of your hardware. There's no real advantage in keeping RAM empty all the time. So they have a detailed post on this in Malware Tips. And so he basically means to say that they're holding their signatures in memory, and that can be useful sometimes. Now let me demonstrate this thing a little bit. Okay, so if he says if we do enable memory optimization, the memory will be lower. But that's not quite the case, if I'm not wrong. At least not in the beta. Now I'm running this with memory optimization on, and we're still getting about 170 megabytes. I've seen it drop to like 150, 140 sometimes, but never less than that. So even if you do enable their memory optimization, it's still quite high for most purposes. I mean, comparing this to other anti-malware companies, it's still quite high. And this is not a concern if you're running a system like mine with 8 gigs of RAM, or if you're running at least 4 gigs. I don't think you will notice any difference. In fact, it may be even faster to hold the signatures in RAM, because that means it'll be easier to access the signatures whenever you're scanning something. So instead of having to read from the hard drive, it'll access it directly from RAM. So in some ways, it can make your system run a lot faster. Let's see what happens if we just turn this off. I'm sure the result is not immediate, but we can see here. Alright, right now it's dropped to 153, but I've seen this go up to like 350 megabytes, and that's quite a lot. So he basically means to say that it's fine if there's signatures in RAM, and nowadays we don't get so many computers that have lower RAM. Like if you've got less than 2 gigs of RAM, I think you may have a concern with this software. Otherwise, if you got more than 2 gigs, I don't think this will make much of a difference. In fact, it may even work faster. And a classic example of this is ESET. ESET also hold their signatures in memory, but we never noticed that. ESET seems to be much faster than most other anti-malware companies, although they have their signatures in memory. And the main reason for that is more RAM usage does not always mean worse system performance. In fact, in some cases it can speed up the system because it takes lesser time to access the signatures from RAM as compared to the hard drive. Now, RAM usage can become a concern if that is your limiting factor. If you've got less RAM on your system and you need other applications to use that RAM, then of course your RAM usage is a concern. But if you got a computer like this where you've got most of your memory free. Like in my case, I never really use the full 8 gigs unless I'm running a couple of virtual machines. Most of the time it's the CPU that maxes out or my disks that max out. So I'm not really concerned that Emsisoft is using a bit more RAM. And if you have a computer like mine, or if you've got at least 4 gigs of RAM, I don't think this will be a huge issue. And that's what he's trying to emphasize over here. Nowadays, not too many people use it, but I would like their memory optimization to improve a bit more, because even with the memory optimization turned on, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. I'd like to see the memory optimization bring the RAM usage to below 50 megabytes for people who really need that. Of course, I couldn't care less about RAM usage because I do have a lot of RAM on the system, but for people who have computers with less RAM, I think there should be an option. So they already have it, to be honest. They have this memory optimization, but at the moment it doesn't seem to be that effective. I mean, it doesn't bring down the RAM usage like he claims. It brings it down to only a few megabytes, sometimes even less. I haven't seen that. So maybe that's because this is a beta, and I'm hoping that in the final version this less part is like 50 megabytes instead of 150 megabytes. And of course the worst case scenario is over 350, which is not much of concern if you have a very fast system. In fact, not necessarily fast, but you need to have more RAM. So my second concern was the window size. Now, as you all know, this new user interface, it seems quite bulky to me. It's big and it takes up a lot of your viewing space. I guess it makes sense. What's the point of leaving out so much space? But honestly, I thought the last interface was just about perfect. I don't like the fact that they've made it even bigger. And he responds to that by saying they've raised the minimum requirements to 1024 by 768. It gives us more flexibility to create a nice looking user interface, and smaller screens are not really found anymore according to our usage statistics. I guess that's kind of correct. Nobody uses 800 by 600 these days. But then again, even on a bigger screen, why would you want an anti-malware product to take up so much screen space? I really don't understand. But again, if he does need more screen space to improve the user interface, I see these icons are unnecessarily big. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know if people like this, but to me it just seems really big. The scan, quarantine, protection buttons, they don't need to be this huge. That's just my opinion, but I guess some people may have problem with smaller buttons. I guess this is more attractive, but I don't know. I mean, honestly, the last user interface was probably the best, and I haven't seen too many antivirus companies with a better user interface than their last. I mean, this user interface is not bad. It still gets the job done, but it still seems like a slight downgrade to me, not a major upgrade. So he just basically goes on to say that nowadays we don't people have higher res monitors and they need a bigger user interface, and there's no point of creating a user interface for monitors that don't exist. So I also asked him a few more questions about Windows 8, because a lot of antivirus companies are a bit skeptical about Windows 8. They don't really like to accept the idea that Windows 8 seems to have brought in some decent protection, and looks like he also has the same viewpoint. He doesn't agree. He says Windows 8 isn't better than in preventing infections than any predecessor system. Now, this is not something I would agree with very much. I think Windows 8 is far more improved than any other previous operating system from Windows. If you look at Windows 7, they just had some anti-spyware in Windows Defender, and that was it. They had Smart Screen Filter, but it wasn't even half as effective back in those times. And with Windows 8, you get a lot of protection out of the box. But okay, he mentions the AV comparative tests. Integrated AV is nothing more than limited base protection for most common infections, but not intended to replace a full AV at all. Well, now this is where I disagree again. I don't think that Windows 8 AV is some base protection as they claim. I think it is a full-featured basic antivirus. Yeah, I know, if you're comparing it to Emsisoft Anti-malware, it does look bleak. But if you compare it with other signature-based products like, let's take for example AVG or Avast. If you just remove their zero-day components, that's basically Windows Defender. So talking about antivirus, I think Windows Defender is a full-featured antivirus. It is a full AV. Yeah, it doesn't have the zero-day capabilities, or maybe the firewall's not that decent, but as far as antivirus goes, I think it is a proper antivirus. Now, apart from that, he doesn't see a significant growth in Windows 8 market share. Lots of people still use XP and 7. That's something I have to agree with. And I asked him what else they're working on in Emsisoft version 9, and he says, apart from the GUI, there's some major upgrades of our backend cloud to improve the behavior blocker detection and reduce false positive alerts to a minimum. So that is good to see. Now, this is something I would really like to see, false behavior blocker alerts, because as effective as the behavior blocker is, I still see a lot of false alerts from the Emsisoft behavior blocker. So if they're working on that, that is a very good sign. So this is the basic mail he sent. Now, I still have a couple of other concerns which I hadn't noticed before, like the user interface takes an awfully long time to load sometimes. You know, when you double click, it takes a while to pop up. There you go. So you can see that delay, and this delay is something new. It wasn't there in the previous version. It seemed to be far more responsive back then. So I don't understand if this is just because it's beta, or if this is something we're to expect in the final version. So I'd like his views on that. I'm going to send him this video, so I'd like some responses as well. And yeah, as far as the quarantine goes, I have a little bit of an issue with the quarantine as well. As you can see, the screen starts flickering the moment I move my cursor over these items. As you can see, there you go. There's a lot of flickering going on here, and that is not very good looking. And I know this is not something major, but this is a beta, so I'm hoping they're working on it. I hope this is in their bugs list. So that's about it. These are all my concerns about the Emsisoft version 9 beta. I hope they work on these things and we have a much better new version. And I'm really looking forward to test version 9. It seems to be exciting. The protection is as good as ever. But as I said, a few concerns, especially with memory usage optimization. He claims that this should bring it down to like a few megabytes, but the minimum I've seen so far is like 120, 140 maybe, but not something that I would call few. So for people who have less than 2 gigs of RAM, of course I know there are not a lot of people out there that do have less than 2 gigs of RAM, unless you're of course in a dinosaur, but I do have some dinosaurs watching this channel, so I have to keep an eye on them. And what about my pet dinosaur? I mean, he's gonna be so sad. Alright, so as you can see, 137 megabytes. I'd like them to bring this down to about like 50 megabytes. Alright, I think... Whoa. I didn't see that coming. So basically, they still use a lot of RAM. There you go, 164.2. Sorry, I was just looking at the security center and not the guard. The guard's over here, 164, and that seems a little too much for my pet dinosaur. So, you know, if they could bring that down, especially because they do give you the option to hold all the signatures in memory. So when you do have the memory usage optimization turned on, I would expect the RAM to be much lower than this. I mean, just for people who don't have too much RAM. Apart from that, I don't really have any other concerns. Hope you guys enjoyed this review. Hope this helps improve the final version of Emsisoft version 9, and I'll see you guys in the final version test. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Have a nice day.